In a quiet suburb just outside of Portland, the soft glow of morning sunlight slipped through the bedroom curtains, casting a warm light across Rachel Morrison's face. She stirred awake to the familiar sound of her baby crying in the next room, just minutes before her alarm was set to buzz. "Good morning, Emma," Rachel murmured with a sleepy smile as she shuffled toward the crib. The moment 6-month-old Emma caught sight of her mother, her tears vanished, replaced by a beaming smile and outstretched hands. That pure, innocent grin never failed to melt Rachel's exhaustion. "Mama's got work today too, so let's be strong together," she whispered as she scooped her daughter up. A quick glance at the clock told her it was 7:15 a.m., only an hour left before she needed to head out. She changed Emma's diaper, then moved to the kitchen to start breakfast, the rich aroma of brewing coffee slowly waking up the rest of her senses. "Mike, are you getting up? Breakfast is ready," she called toward the bedroom. Silence. With a resigned sigh, Rachel carried Emma into the living room and began scribbling a note for the new babysitter. It had been 3 weeks since she'd returned from maternity leave, and this routine had already become her new normal. As a senior consultant at a real estate firm, Rachel's schedule was constantly packed. This morning was no different. Daniel finally appeared, suitcase in hand, his tired face betraying how little rest he'd gotten, but even in exhaustion, he still looked good. He was a project manager at an architectural design company, and lately, his business trips had become more frequent. "Chicago again?" Rachel asked, already knowing the answer. "Yeah, tonight's flight. I'll be gone just 3 days." Though she tried to hide it, a flicker of disappointment crossed her face. Since Emma was born, their time as a couple had dwindled. Daniel was a dependable provider, but when it came to parenting, he often took a back seat, choosing work over late-night feedings or diaper duty. "I put Emma's milk in the fridge. The new babysitter starts tomorrow," she said, handing him the note. "The last one quit suddenly." Daniel took a sip of his coffee and nodded. "It'll be fine. Don't stress. You should focus on your work, this promotion is a big deal for you, right?" He wasn't wrong. Rachel was at a critical turning point in her career. Before going on maternity leave, she'd been the front-runner for a team leader position. But now, with competition heating up, the stakes had never been higher. If she nailed this current project, the promotion would likely be hers. Her phone buzzed. Chloe lit up the screen. Rachel answered with a small smile. "Good morning, Chloe. You're up early." "Morning, Kate. Got time this afternoon? There's a new cafe I'm dying to try. Wanna come?" Her sister's bubbly voice filled Rachel's ear. Chloe, a trend-chasing fashion blogger, lived in a completely different world, but despite their lifestyle differences, the bond between them was solid. "Ah, I wish. I've got a big presentation today," Rachel said apologetically. Emma was going to be with the sitter, but, oh, that's a shame. "What about this weekend?" "I was thinking of inviting Mom too. She's still recovering from her cataract surgery. I'm a little worried about her." Rachel paused, her thoughts turning to their mother, Margaret. The surgery had gone well, and her vision was steadily improving. But lately, stress and fatigue seemed to make her more forgetful than usual, something the whole family had noticed. "That sounds nice," Rachel said after a beat. "Sunday would work for me." "I've been meaning to check on Mom too," Rachel said, ending the call with a sigh. She gave Emma a soft squeeze, breathing in the sweet scent of baby shampoo. "Well, little one, change of plans. Looks like you're coming to Mama's office today," she said with a forced cheerfulness. With practiced urgency, Rachel got herself ready, packed up Emma's things, and secured her in the car seat. As she opened the front door, Daniel was also stepping out, adjusting his tie. He gave her a quick kiss goodbye. "Take care. So Emma's coming with you, huh?" "Yeah, I don't really have another option," she replied with a tired smile. "Thankfully, there's a nursing room at the office." Daniel offered an apologetic grin. "Sorry, I've got a packed day too, important meeting first thing." I get it, Rachel said, her smile tightening slightly. Driving through the morning traffic, she glanced at Emma in the rearview mirror. Her daughter was happily babbling to herself, and despite the weight of the day ahead, Rachel felt a flicker of warmth. Some days, she barely recognized herself in the blur of meetings, feedings, and deadlines, but then there was Emma, a reminder of what really mattered. That evening, after settling in at home, Rachel's phone buzzed. Chloe's name lit up the screen. Kate, her sister's voice was unusually subdued. I've decided to move back into Mom and Dad's place for a while. Some stuff's come up. Rachel's brow furrowed. What's going on? Did something happen? No, nothing serious, Chloe replied a bit too quickly. I just need a breather, and I've been worried about Mom too. Though concern lingered, Rachel was comforted knowing her sister would be nearby. Maybe more family time was just what they all needed. Later, as she gently laid Emma in the crib and hummed a lullaby, Rachel felt a familiar surge of resolve. Family, that's where she drew her strength. It gave her purpose, especially as work demands continued to escalate. The following weeks brought even more pressure. Rachel was now leading a major project, which meant longer hours and more stress. Her days began before dawn and ended well past sunset. On top of it all, her babysitter had started canceling more frequently, leaving Rachel scrambling. One Wednesday morning, her phone rang before the alarm. It was the sitter. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Morrison. I have a family emergency, I won't be able to make it today. Rachel let out a groan, cradling her forehead in her hand. Of all days. She had a high-stakes meeting she couldn't miss. After a long moment of hesitation, she dialed her mom. Morning, Mom. I really hate to ask, but, could you take Emma today? Margaret didn't miss a beat. Of course, sweetheart. I'd love to spend time with my granddaughter. But the doctor still says no driving, so you'll have to drop her off. You're a lifesaver, Mom. Thank you. What started as a one-time favor quickly evolved into a routine. Over the next month, Margaret began watching Emma more regularly, 2, sometimes 3 times a week. Rachel was relieved. Her mother seemed to truly enjoy the bonding time, and to Rachel's surprise, Margaret even looked more vibrant and energized. Chloe, meanwhile, had been acting off. Since moving back home, she'd been unusually restless, always out of the house, rarely joining meals or chats. Then one evening, as they all sat down for dinner, she dropped a sudden announcement. I'm heading overseas, Paris and Milan. I need to cover Fashion Week. Her voice was bright, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Margaret peered at her daughter, clearly worried. Are you sure you're okay? You haven't really seen yourself lately. Chloe laughed, too quickly. What? I'm fine, Mom. I'm actually really excited. That night, Rachel knocked on her sister's door. Are you sure everything's all right? She asked gently. If something's bothering you. I'm here. Chloe sat quietly on the edge of her bed, eyes downcast. Kate, she faltered, then shook her head. No, it's nothing. I'm just a bit burnt out. This trip will help me reset. The following week, Chloe boarded her flight. Her Instagram was soon overflowing with chic Parisian cafes and front-row shots from fashion shows. But her texts grew shorter, her calls infrequent, often ending with a rushed, sorry, I'm busy. One afternoon, after a brief phone call, Rachel drove over to pick up Emma. She found Margaret by the window, knitting as she kept a watchful eye on her granddaughter napping nearby. How are you feeling, Mom? Rachel asked, settling into the couch. Is your vision getting better? Margaret looked up and smiled. It's much improved, though things are still a bit blurry sometimes. Then, after a pause, she added a little sheepishly, my memory's been more troublesome lately. Yesterday I spent an hour looking for my keys, they were in the fridge. Rachel frowned. Maybe you should talk to your doctor about that? Oh, it's just age catching up to me, Margaret said with a wave of her hand. But, have you heard from Chloe? She hasn't posted anything online lately. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly. Now that she thought about it, her sister's normally active social media had been quiet for over a week. When Rachel tried calling Chloe, the phone rang once before going straight to voicemail. Her stomach sank. She redialed, but again, no answer. Just as her worry began to spiral, a message came through. I've fallen ill and am coming home early. May not be in touch for a while. Don't worry. The words did little to ease her anxiety. 3 days later, Chloe finally reached out. She told Rachel she was back in the States, but instead of returning to their parents' house, she'd gone straight to her apartment. I just need to rest, Chloe said, her voice thin and drained. Meanwhile, at home, Rachel's world had slipped into autopilot. Daniel's business trips had only increased, and even on the rare nights he was home, their conversations had boiled down to diapers, daycare, and grocery lists. The warmth, the intimacy, they were fading. One night, after putting Emma to bed, Rachel sat in the living room with a glass of wine, staring into the stillness. The quiet wasn't peaceful, it was lonely. She picked up her phone and called Daniel. Mike, we hardly talk anymore, she said softly. Is it really just work? There was a pause on the other end. Then his voice came, measured but defensive. Of course. What are you trying to say? I'm sorry, she replied, her voice cracking slightly. I feel alone. I get it, he said, sighing. But once this project wraps up, things should calm down. Just hang in there, okay? After the call ended, Rachel sat in silence, staring out into the night. The darkness outside her window mirrored what she felt inside. Everything feels different now, she thought. But even as life grew more complicated, Emma remained her anchor. Her heart had swelled with pride at her daughter's first mama, and she'd cried joyful tears watching those wobbly first steps. Those moments were her lifeline. The next morning, Rachel's phone buzzed. Chloe. Kate, her sister said. It's been a while. I'm okay now, but I have something important to tell you. Can we meet soon? What is it? Did something happen? Rachel asked, heart quickening. I can't talk about it over the phone. But don't worry, it's not bad. I just need to talk in person. There was a seriousness in Chloe's tone, a quiet urgency that Rachel couldn't shake. But with a critical meeting ahead, she had no choice but to shelve the conversation for later and shift into work mode. That evening, exhausted from a long day, Rachel finally settled onto the couch with another glass of wine. Emma was asleep, the house was quiet, and Daniel hadn't called, only a brief text saying his trip had been extended by 2 more days. She reached for the remote, ready to disappear into a show, when the phone rang. The screen read, Mom. Her heart jumped. Margaret rarely called at night. Mom? Is everything okay? Her mother's voice came through, shaky and distressed. Rachel, when are you coming to pick up the baby? Rachel froze. What? Mom, Emma's with me. I just put her to bed. Margaret's voice rose, confused and a little sharp. No, she's here. You left her with me a month ago. You said you were overwhelmed and needed help. Rachel's pulse spiked. What are you talking about? I dropped her off 3 days ago, yes, but I picked her up that same evening. She's home. Right now. A heavy silence fell over the line. Mom? Rachel said, her voice trembling. Are you okay? When Margaret spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Then, who have I been taking care of? Heart pounding, Rachel bolted from the sofa and rushed to Emma's room. She pushed open the door and saw her daughter sleeping peacefully in the glow of the nightlight. She touched her cheek, warm, soft, familiar. This was Emma. Mom, please, Emma is here. You must be confused, she said, trying to sound calm even as her thoughts raced. I'm not confused, Margaret said firmly, her usual gentleness gone. The baby here is real. All the toys, the clothes you brought, they're here. You left them. A chill crept up Rachel's spine. This wasn't just forgetfulness. Something was deeply wrong. She tried calling Daniel, but he didn't pick up. Mom, listen to me. Stay where you are. I'm coming over right now. But first, can you send me a photo of the baby? The moment the image came through, Rachel's blood ran cold. It was a baby girl. Blonde hair. Round face. Even that same sweet, dimpled smile. But, the eyes. The baby in the photo had brown eyes. Emma's eyes were unmistakably blue. Despite the rising panic, Rachel forced herself to breathe. Mom, don't move. I'm on my way. She threw a few essentials into a bag, gently lifted the real Emma from her crib, and strapped her into the car seat. As she drove through the night, the streets blurred past. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. Who was the baby Mom had been caring for? And who had left her there? Emma. Was this some kind of twisted joke? But the way Margaret had spoken, trembling, serious, left no room for doubt. This wasn't a prank. When Rachel arrived at her mother's house, the porch light was on, casting a soft, lonely glow over the front steps. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Margaret sat hunched on the living room couch, her eyes swollen and red, evidence of recent tears. Mom, where's the baby? Margaret didn't say a word, just raised a shaky hand and pointed upstairs. Second floor. Guest room. She's sleeping, in the crib. Rachel didn't hesitate. Her legs moved before her brain caught up. She hurried up the staircase, her heart pounding with every step. At the guest room door, she paused only long enough to turn on the light. There, nestled in a crib, was a sleeping baby. Rachel's breath caught. Up close, the child looked even more like Emma than the photo had suggested, the same delicate nose, the same tiny hands curled near her face, even the same way she tucked one leg slightly under the other as she slept. But there were differences too. Her hair was just a touch darker. Her frame was smaller, more fragile. And there, embroidered on the edge of the baby blanket, was a name. Isla. Rachel's knees buckled slightly. She grabbed the doorframe to steady herself and sucked in a deep breath. Back downstairs, Margaret was standing with a brown diaper bag in her arms. This is the bag you brought, she said, holding it out. All of the baby's things are in here. Rachel took the bag and opened it. The contents were unfamiliar. Baby clothes she'd never seen before. Toys Emma didn't own. Bottles filled with a different formula. But the bag itself, that was familiar. It was Chloe's. She'd seen her use it countless times. Mom, when did you start watching this baby? Who brought her? Margaret looked up, clearly rattled. You did, Rachel. You brought her a month ago. You said work was overwhelming and you needed help. No, Mom, Rachel said, her voice shaking. That wasn't me. I never left Emma with you for a month. Margaret sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. But, it looked like you. It was you, or at least, it felt like you. I thought something was off, I did. Your hair seemed different, shorter. And you were a bit smaller than usual. Rachel stared at her, heart pounding. A single name escaped her lips. Chloe. The pieces slammed together all at once, Chloe's sudden departure for Fashion Week, her abrupt return claiming illness, her distant behavior, the urgent conversation she'd promised, and now, this. Rachel's voice was barely audible. Mom, are you saying Chloe brought the baby? Pretending to be me? Margaret's hands trembled. She said, Rachel asked me to. That's what she said. At first, you were with her, I thought, but later, she started coming alone. And with my memory being what it is, and my eyesight, I wasn't sure what was real. A cold, terrible thought slid into Rachel's mind like ice through her veins. Daniel's endless business trips. Chloe's vanishing act. That call where Chloe said she had something important to tell her. Rachel's stomach turned. With shaking fingers, she pulled out her phone and dialed Daniel again. No answer. She tried Chloe next. Straight to voicemail. Her voice was tight as she left a message. Chloe. Call me back. Now. I need answers. I need to know what the hell is going on. Hanging up, Rachel pulled Margaret into a hug. This isn't your fault, she whispered. You were misled. But we're going to figure this out. Together. She climbed the stairs again and walked quietly into the guest room. Isla was still sleeping, utterly peaceful, blissfully unaware of the chaos swirling around her. Rachel leaned in, brushing the baby's cheek with the back of her hand. The warmth, the innocence, it broke her heart. This child was innocent. Blameless. Back downstairs, her phone rang. Daniel. She took a breath to brace herself and picked up. Mike. I need the truth. Right now. What's going on? His voice was strangely calm. Too calm. Kate, what are you talking about? Isla. Chloe's baby. She's at Mom's house. And no one has told me anything. So I'm asking you now, what's going on? On the other end, Daniel sucked in a breath. Then silence. Finally, in a quiet, broken voice, he said, let's talk when I get home. I'm taking the first flight out tomorrow morning. We need to talk, Rachel. Urgently. He hung up. Rachel stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her entire body was trembling. She kissed Emma's forehead, hugged Margaret tightly, and said, I'm taking Emma home tonight. Daniel's coming back tomorrow, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. She turned to look at her mother one more time. Until then, can you please take care of Isla? Margaret nodded, her expression torn between worry and love. Of course. But Rachel, are you okay? Rachel gave the only honest answer she could. I don't know, Mom. I really don't. But I need to know the truth. The thought echoed in Rachel's head as she drove home, the weight of a sleepless night pressing heavily on her shoulders. Her mind swirled with horrible possibilities, scenarios she didn't want to believe but could no longer ignore. Outside, the Portland sky was thick and gray, a brooding canvas that mirrored the storm brewing in her heart. It felt like a warning. She'd only managed a few restless hours of sleep before dawn. Strangely, Emma had slept later than usual, as if even she sensed something wasn't right. At exactly 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. Rachel opened the door to find Daniel standing there, suitcase in hand. He looked wrecked, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes rumpled, his expression hollow. Come in, Rachel said, her voice cool and clipped. Daniel stepped inside and sank onto the living room sofa, burying his face in his hands. Kate, he said, barely above a whisper. I'll explain everything. All of it. But just as he began, her phone buzzed. It was a call from Chloe. Kate. I'm at Mom's now, her sister said. I heard what happened last night. We need to talk. An hour later, Rachel pulled into the driveway of her childhood home with Emma in the back seat. Daniel had said he'd come separately, something about needing time to collect his thoughts. But to Rachel, it felt more like avoidance. Chloe was already on the porch, and she looked like a shadow of her former self. Gone was the polished, glamorous fashion blogger, in her place stood a pale, tired woman in faded black jeans and a plain sweater. The moment she saw Rachel, she broke down. Kate, I'm so sorry. Rachel didn't respond. She brushed past her sister and walked straight into the house. Margaret sat in the living room, Isla sleeping gently in her arms. Her eyes were full of sadness, tinged with confusion. Daniel's not here yet? Margaret asked quietly. He said he's coming later, Rachel replied. Chloe followed them into the room and sat stiffly on the edge of the couch. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I'll tell you everything now. No more lies. She inhaled deeply, then said the words that Rachel had feared and expected. Daniel and we had an affair. Rachel felt the world tilt. It was one thing to suspect, to wonder, but to hear it out loud felt like her heart was being ripped apart. Since when? She asked, her voice brittle. Last winter, Chloe said. While you were on maternity leave. He said he was lonely. Margaret gasped, bringing her hand to her mouth. Chloe, with your sister's husband? I know, Mom, Chloe said through tears. It was the worst mistake of my life. But I really believed we loved each other. Or, at least I thought we did. Rachel turned her gaze to the window, her voice low and almost detached. And then you got pregnant. Chloe nodded. Daniel panicked. He asked me to get an abortion. But I couldn't. I wanted this baby. He told me he loved me, but that he couldn't leave you or Emma. Just then, the doorbell rang. Daniel had arrived. The air in the room froze. He stepped in and looked from Rachel to Chloe, then down at Isla in Margaret's arms. His voice cracked. So, she's my child. Chloe stood, her expression flaring with betrayal. You promised me, Daniel. You said you'd leave Rachel and we'd be together. Daniel shook his head, eyes wide with regret. I was confused. I didn't know what I was saying. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Liar. Chloe shouted, her voice sharp and cutting. The sudden noise startled both babies. Emma began crying in Rachel's arms, and seconds later, Isla joined in. Their wails filled the room, adding layers of chaos to an already unbearable moment. Holding Emma close, Rachel spoke in a quiet, trembling voice. You've been living a lie, Daniel. 2 women. 2 children. And now this. Daniel's shoulders slumped. Kate, I didn't know what to do. I love you. But I loved Chloe, too. And once Isla was born, I couldn't help loving her as well. As Margaret tried to soothe Isla, she looked at Chloe with heartbreak in her eyes. But why did you pretend to be Rachel when you brought the baby to me? Chloe's face flushed with shame. Because I knew. I knew about your cataracts, your vision problems. I took advantage of it. I'm sorry. As a fashion blogger, I pay close attention to how people dress, move, speak. It wasn't hard to mimic Kate. Just enough to fool you. She added, her voice cracking, the trip overseas? That was a lie. I wasn't in Paris or Milan. I was hiding out in a private facility after giving birth. I wanted to recover, get back in shape, and figure out what to do next. She broke down, sobbing. I'm the worst, aren't I? Rachel stood frozen, her arms around Emma, caught in a storm of betrayal and sorrow. But something else began to stir beneath the rage, grief, yes, but also clarity. You didn't just betray me, Chloe. You didn't just ruin our bond. You used Mom's condition, her love, her trust. That's what I can't forgive. Tears slipped down Margaret's cheeks. To think, you used my poor eyesight, my love for both of you, her voice trailed off into silence. And my forgetfulness, Margaret whispered, her voice thick with shame, that I couldn't even tell my own daughters apart. Mom, this isn't your fault, Rachel said softly, stepping closer and placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You were misled. You were trying to help. Nearby, Daniel approached the sleeping Isla and gently touched her tiny fingers, his expression clouded with emotion. My daughter, he murmured. She may share your blood, Rachel cut in sharply, but you have no right to call yourself her father. Her words sliced through the room like a blade. You don't understand what family even means. Chloe took a hesitant step forward, tears still glistening in her eyes. Kate, please. I regret everything. I didn't want to destroy your home. I told myself that, at first. But the truth is, I was selfish. I believed Daniel when he said he'd leave everything for me and Isla. I let myself believe lies. Rachel's voice trembled with quiet fury. "Do you even understand what you've done?" she asked, her tone low but unwavering. "You shattered the trust that held this family together. And what I can't forgive is that you used Mom, took advantage of her condition. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice." A heavy silence settled over the room. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, a steady rhythm of drops tapping the window pane, like the ticking of a clock counting down the moments until everything changed. Strangely, both babies had stopped crying. Emma and Isla were now gazing at each other from their cradled spots, calm as if sensing the shift in the room. Holding Emma close to her chest, Rachel spoke again, this time with a quiet steadiness. "The only innocent ones in this mess are these girls. For their sake, we have to find a way forward." Margaret nodded, her voice still trembling but firm. "That's right. They're sisters, half-sisters, yes, but they're still innocent. They deserve better than the mess we made." Daniel and Chloe stared at the floor, silent, perhaps for the first time truly absorbing the consequences of their actions. 6 months later, autumn had draped Portland in a glorious tapestry of gold and crimson. Rachel knelt in the yard of her newly purchased cottage, gathering leaves as they fell around her like slow-motion confetti. Emma, now just over a year old, waddled beside her, giggling as she tried to catch the falling colors. A few feet away, Isla chased after a yellow leaf, equally delighted. "Let's go inside, girls. It's getting chilly," Margaret called out, stepping onto the porch in a warm coat. Her health had improved. Though she'd recently been diagnosed with early-stage dementia, treatment had helped stabilize her condition. Her vision had fully recovered after surgery, she now only needed slim reading glasses for everyday use. "Thanks for today, Mom," Rachel said as they stepped inside. "Work's been so hectic. I couldn't do this without you." Since the divorce, finalized 3 months earlier, Rachel had thrown herself into her career, and it had paid off. She'd been promoted to vice president at her real estate firm. She had taken a leap, buying this new home, determined to raise Emma on her own. But the truth was, she wasn't alone. Margaret had become her anchor. And surprisingly, Isla had become part of her life too. Daniel and Chloe had tried, for a while, to make their relationship work, but it eventually unraveled. Chloe, disillusioned and heartbroken, had moved on. 2 months ago, she'd packed up and left for Los Angeles with a new boyfriend. "I was fooled again," Chloe had said before leaving. "Daniel was never serious. I was just a distraction." Daniel had since become estranged from both families. He paid child support regularly and was allowed monthly visits with the girls, but those moments were stiff, formal, and emotionally distant. Neither child seemed to recognize him as anything more than a visitor. "Snack time," Margaret announced, seating the 2 toddlers on the rug and arranging slices of fruit on a small tray. From the kitchen, Rachel watched them, Emma and Isla. Though technically half-sisters, they behaved more like twins, constantly mimicking one another. They argued over toys, sure, but always made up with laughter moments later. There was an effortless bond between them, one born from innocence, not blood. "It's strange, isn't it?" Margaret said as she joined Rachel in the kitchen, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "After how it all began, somehow, we've become a real family." Rachel smiled softly, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Yeah. I didn't think I could accept it at first. But when I look at them, I realize, they need each other. And, in some way, I need both of them too." Margaret nodded. "There's something thicker than blood." "Maybe so." Rachel turned toward the window, watching the leaves swirl through the wind outside. For a long moment, she simply stood there, breathing in the crisp air of change. "We all make mistakes," she thought. "But what really matters is the choice we make afterward." She returned to the living room and sat between the 2 girls, gathering them both into her arms. "We're not perfect," she whispered, "but we're still a family." Emma and Isla looked up and touched her cheeks with their small, gentle hands. Their smiles, pure and forgiving, wrapped around Rachel like a blanket. For the first time in a long while, she felt something close to peace. Outside, the wind danced across the garden, lifting golden leaves into the air like sparks of renewal. The seasons were changing. So were they. It wasn't the end. It was a new beginning.